So this was originally supposed to just be a test and math video, but after researching the videos that were out there on the topic and watching TenTen's 44111 is a scam video, I just have to go over everything because there's just so much wrong. My next video would actually be the 44111 versus 43311 comparison and another one with an attack echo forecast. Sorry, I don't want to mix that in here anymore. I think it would just be cleaner just having a new video. I want to know, I don't want any drama from this, and it's just like a critique, but it's just such a bad video, and when it's literally just misinformation. Like, I'm sorry, and I understand making a mistake or two is fine, as I've made some, but when the entirety of a video is wrong and is super biased and influences how people are playing negatively, especially with such a large fan base, it's just not acceptable in my eyes. I'll make sure to do as much research as I can to not misinform or give bad advice to my audience, even with it being really small, but like, seeing this video, I just don't know if there was any due diligence done. Like, if I were to make a mistake, I usually try to go back with a comment or even change the title if it's like slightly wrong at this point. So the reasoning for a lot of things he said in the video simply do not make sense. Most of the video is a logical fallacy called a red herring. I don't believe it was intentional, but I must say that most of the video is very misleading. Before I get into all of it, I will explain with an example. Essentially, it's like people saying A plus B is equal to C. Well, the way you disprove it is simply by proving that A plus B does not equal C, because the math was wrong somewhere. So if 1 plus 2 is equal to 4, well, clearly we can do the math and see how it was wrong. The issue with the video was that if the question was A plus B is equal to C, the response is C is wrong because X plus Y is equal to Z? This doesn't disprove anything at all with the former point still standing. Starting with the first few seconds, he claims that
I've been seeing a lot of people trying to push for the 44111 build, claiming that it is easier to farm, it is easier to obtain in the early game, and you should be doing it. No, you should never be doing it. That is completely wrong.
So to refute this, you simply need to prove that this is just not the case. Prove that 44111 is harder to get than 43311, which I prove later is not true, but still, regardless, what is his reasoning?
That is completely wrong. And it's nothing to do with the fact that it's easier to obtain. It has nothing to do with the fact that the subset are easier to roll. It is just mathematically purely wrong. And it just comes down to simple calculus.
No, you should never be doing it. This is completely wrong and has nothing to do with the fact it is easier to obtain. Nothing to deal with substats that are easier to roll. It is mathematically purely wrong using simple calculus. As you can see, the statement was that 44111 is easier to get, and the response was that being easier has nothing to do with being easier to get, and that is mathematically wrong using calculus? Okay, but actually watching the video, I do understand he's talking about damage with the concept of optimization, but this does not change the fact that this does not reflect the statement of why I should be using 44111, that being it is easier to obtain. I will later prove that even that statement or his optimization is also simply wrong. So essentially, if the argument was you should use 44111 because it is easier to farm and get, his response was no, because it deals less damage. These two topics just don't correlate. I'll also explain why it's easier to farm 44111 than the 43311. Essentially, you can cross out the two 1 cost echoes because they're a common factor, and we can just focus on the 4 and 3 cost. Now let's just see if the statement is true. So a 4 cost has a potential of 7 main stat rolls. With most wanting crit rate or crit damage, we can say that 2 out of 7 chance of getting what you want, so a 29% chance. If you included attack percent echoes that are really good too, which you can see in my previous video, it's now a 3 out of 7 or a 43% chance of getting something usable. Bosses also have a pity rate of 2, so you'll be getting one every other time at least. So using the 2 out of 7 chance and excluding the attack percent one, it is a 14.28% chance of you getting something nice for yourself if you hit pity every time. So how does this compare with a 3 cost echo? Well, elites can usually drop from 2 different sets, unlike bosses who will always be 1. This RNG alone sucks and splits your chance in half. But now let's just see what else there is. There are 7 different damage bonuses including attack, but just to be nice, I'll be including attack, making it 2 out of 7 as well. Elites have a PD of 4, so every 3 times you don't get something, the 4th will be guaranteed. Doing the simple math, you got a 3.57 chance of getting something you want if you hit PD every time. So again, no, this is not true, even though his reasoning didn't even address this fact. Oh yeah, did I also mention you can only farm so many 3 costs in your world per day? Let me just go over this real quick because wow.
And you can see that without any substat, assuming you're only caring about main stats, you're still better off running a 4-3-3-1-1 build. Always. Why? Let's look into the math. The first assumption people make is that your 4-4-1-1 will have way better substat than your 4-3-3-1-1 because it is easier to farm. And that's completely false.
Again, he completely misses the mark. While on the topic of damage, with 4-3-3-1-1 be superior to 4-4-1-1-1 damage-wise, he is saying that people are refuting the topic by saying 4-4-1-1-1 has an easier time getting substats? Fine, whatever. As restarted as this sounds, we can understand what he's trying to say from this clip later in the video.
And a smart man at this point would immediately recognize that there's no way this will ever compete. The 30% damage main stat is just significantly better than the 4-1 main stat, to the point where even if you have the god roll, the best roll, the perfect roll on your 4-1 piece, it probably won't compete with your 3-3 piece.
And that's being nice for the interpretation, okay? But let me just go back to the topic at hand, okay?
The first assumption people make is that your 4-4-1-1 will have way better substat than your 4-3-3-1-1 because it is easier to farm, and that's completely false.
The next point that he says people say is that 4-4-1-1-1 will have better stats than 4-3-3-1-1 because it is easier to farm. So how would you disprove this statement? Well, simply put, you can say this is a completely independent factor regardless of the type of echo, whether it's a 4, 3, or 1 cost, as it's all RNG. That's a fair reasoning. But what the statement refers to is how 4-4-1-1-1 is easier to farm, and as such getting more opportunities to roll for substats. As such, you got a higher chance of getting something good if you keep gambling. You know, gamblers always quit before they hit big. So, what's his reasoning?
That's because your 4-4-1-1-1 is transferable. This 4 here is equivalent to this 4. I mean, if you got a good 4 cost on your 4-4-1-1-1 setup, you have a good 4 cost for your 4-3-3-1-1 setup. These two pieces are the exact same. There's no different. The same goes with the two 1 cost at the bottom. If your 1 cost have a god roll for your 4-4-1-1 build, so will your 1 cost roll for the 4-3-3-1-1 because they are the same, they're the share. But the only difference between these two sets are that you're running a 4-1 setup here versus a 3-3 setup here. And this is a massive difference since this gives 60% damage.
Do you see the issue? The original point that was made was that 4-4-1-1-1 deals less damage than 4-3-3-1-1. And he said that people would refute this by saying that the substats are easier to get. But his response to that it's not easier to get is that the echoes are quote-unquote transferable, and then talk more about damages in his next part, which again misses the point. What's worse is that not only is this wrong, his reasoning explaining why it cannot be made up with substats is also entirely wrong. I'm telling you right now, these two pieces right here are infinitely better than the Dookie 3-3 cost echoes with no substat that he talks about. But you know, my opinion doesn't really matter, as what matters is me disproving his point soon, which I'll get to soon enough. So he states that the 30% main stat from the 3 cost echo is significantly better than a 4-1 cost. But the reason why this is all wrong is because he's using all of this in a vacuum and only considering the 3-3 and 4-1 cost. He's not even considering the other 4 costs, which if both 4 costs are crit for the 4-4-1-1-1 build, the 4-1 cost is actually benefiting more than the rest of the build. So he even later states in the video that crit is only good when you get more crit, which is what 4-4-1-1-1 allows. So the issue with the statement is that it's also a red herring. The math done there doesn't matter because that's not even how damage would even work in a real game. I can make the exact same statement saying 3 cost attack percent echoes are better and claim that it's better than crit if I were to use the same example, but that's just not the case in a real game. Okay, finally I can explain this part.
And a smart man at this point would immediately recognize that there's no way this will ever compete. The 30% damage main stat is just significantly better than the 4-1 main stat, to the point where even if you have the god roll, the best roll, the perfect roll on your 4-1 piece, it probably won't compete with your 3-3 piece.
So anyway, let me just debunk his statement using some quick math. Let's assume with 0 echoes, you can choose between a godly 4-1 piece or a dookie 3-3 piece. So let's just assume the base stats of 1000 of a 5-star character with a 5-star weapon and a 5-150 ratio and no damage bonuses. I won't be using the damage multiplier from skills as they will be irrelevant for this. So the math is pretty simple. With a 3-3 cost with 0 useful substats, so we're just going to assume HP percent, defense percent, and energy regen. Well, the math would look something like this. We start with 1000 attack times the 2 echoes of 1.6% damage bonus, and we'll get a raw attack or a value of 1600. Now, factoring a crit hit of 1.5 times, we'll get a 2400 damage on a crit. Now, plugging that into this formula, as I'll put up top, we'll get this number right here. Now, let's try the 1 and 4 cost echoes with absolutely not really nice substats at least. And to be fair, let me use my echoes that I currently own, and it's gonna be these. I will just convert the main stat to crit rate to just further prove the point. But from the crit stats, or from the substats that we're getting for the 4-1, we're getting 245 more attack, 15 more crit rate, and 32.4 more crit damage. So our stats will now look like 1245 attack, 42 crit rate, and 182.4 crit damage with 0 damage bonus. So we have 1245 attack, and then you multiply that by a crit value of 1.824, and we get 2270.88 for a crit hit. Now, plug that into the formula as you'll see above, and we get this number. So, as we can see, only 2.1% better than the 3-3 cost, but the point still stands. Substats do matter and can make a huge difference. But not only that, this test was heavily biased towards the damage bonus build, as we literally did not have anything to build off of or crit to go off of. Now, if you're trying to refute this, saying it's not fair, I'm literally doing what was told in the video, that these 4-4-1-1-1 costs, even with a godly build, will never be able to stand up to a 4-3-3-1-1, which is just clearly not true, which I should show in my next video. For the optimization box, I would have said I have no issue, as I've said the same thing in like 2 of my own videos. My only issue is the way he misinterprets the box somehow. I don't understand how such a big content creator who has played these gacha games so long and makes guides is getting it so wrong.
Here's the problem. The material is not priced the same. There's a price attached to them. Imagine you're a construction company and you have to pay for the individual length to maximize a box. Well, in order to increase the length of your attack, you have to pay $1 for each 1 meter. In order to increase the length of your damage, you have to pay $1 for each 1 meter. But for crit, you have to pay $2, maybe even $3 per meter. And why? Again, that is because crit is only effective when you build both critical rate and critical damage stat. Therefore, they upcharge you because it costs double the amount of material.
So the analogy itself is wrong. Rather than you getting upcharged for crit because you need both stats, it's more like you're paying the same amount but getting less meters for the first few purchases, but as you get a bit more, you start getting more meters than attack and damage bonus per dollar, with attack and damage bonus also the per dollar going down as you get more. So regardless, and in other words, this is wrong because it is not a linear process, nor are the stats, and as such it is super misleading. So while what you're saying on how the crit rate and crit damage need each other, which is true, you're misinterpreting what that exactly means. And up next, this is just...
I mean, the quickest way and the fastest way to maximize your damage is just ignore crit, because they are overcharging you. You just focus on attack and focus on getting damage. That's the quickest way of getting damage, until your damage and attack gets so big to a point where it is no longer efficient to increase these stats. In mathematics, there's something called diminishing return.
What the? This has to be one of the greatest sins I have ever heard. Especially coming from a Genshin guide maker. I understand what you're trying to say, so it's understandable when you have literally 0 echoes, but literally anything after the first few steps are going for crit and attack. The next step when you start a build is literally getting the crit rate up to be able to utilize a whole new stat. Then the rest is up to you and your build, though I understand the same could be said with something like damage bonus. But this statement right here saying, go damage bonus and attack percent until you hit diminishing returns, then go crit? What the hell? Do I even need to explain how this is incorrect? Not only is the only reason why you are using diminishing returns wrong, the application of diminishing returns is also wrong too. You don't build crit after attack and damage bonus because you have diminishing returns on attack and damage bonus. You build a crit because it's good, really good. Next, the quote-unquote diminishing return is actually set up pretty high. Assuming you have an ideal 5-piece set as a 5-star DPS or 5-star weapon with double crit on everything and attack percent on everything, only until you hit 2600 in attack and a ratio around a 68 to 96 or something along those lines will crit start outpacing attack by the slightest margin because of said diminishing returns. I don't know the damage bonus diminishing returns as I've not tested it myself, but the point still stands. You need a lot of a stat for even a little diminishing return. So I'll go one further. I know quite a few people came from Genshin and always talk about attack and the diminishing return, so you just always go crit. The concept is the same for WutheringWaves, so I hope you don't mind me using the comparison. This is a cautious system. It ranks your builds and I kinda just use it like a calculator, I'm not gonna lie. But the main thing to understand is the percent gain over the base, which is how much your damage is increasing with one more substat of said stat. Essentially, if it's not high, either they don't scale well with it or because they have hit the diminishing return mark. But here, let's look at my Yai Miko. As you can see, attack is slightly less than crit damage and quite a bit from crit rate. Then you look at the scenario. Oh hey Bennett. Oh, a Bennett, the guy that gives 1300 attack. Yeah, we got a lot of attack, nearly 3300. And the fact that my attack percent gain is still high, despite me nearly having 3.3k attack, says enough about the diminishing return. Now, if you want to see just a nice endgame balanced build, well, you could look at my Raiden. As you can see, Raiden is still benefiting just as much with attack as the other stuff like crit stats in this scenario. And this does not have Bennett, by the way. This is double Hydro plus Jean. Okay, but to reiterate, you're gonna need a lot of a stat, which this a lot value will differ depending on the stat, but you're gonna need a lot of it to hit this diminishing return mark. Again, you don't build crit at the end and focus other stats in the beginning. No, you need to build every stat in the beginning because you are severely lacking stats. Even at the end game, you know that attack percent is very comparable with crit, right? Even with your diminishing returns. You can see that in one of my previous videos if you guys are curious. The next part of this video, I have already disproven it. Getting a 4 cost crit rate crit damage echo is significantly easier than getting 2 3 cost echoes.
I know people are trying to do the 4-4-1-1 setup, especially on either Havoc or Thunder characters, because you can get the 5-piece set bonus, but it's all completely wrong. It has nothing to do with the set bonus. It has nothing to do with that it's easier to get crit because you can get both. It is simply inefficient in both of these cases compared to just doing a single free cost echo with the right main stats without either set bonus or without any substats.
Again, when people are saying that it's easier to build, but you're refuting the statement by saying no, it deals less damage. How does that even make sense? Like, I don't understand how you're correlating those two. And his TLDR is wrong.
But just to summarize it from the beginning, a 4-3-3-1-1 setup where your free cost simply has the right main stats, even though it is on the wrong set, even though it doesn't have substat or has terrible substat, it's pretty much always going to be better than any 4-4-1-1 setup you can possibly come to build. Your 4-4-1-1 setup can have the 5-piece set effect. Your 4-4-1-1 setup can have the best substat in the game. For the most part, it is not as good as simply running a 4-3-3-1-1 setup as long as these two free costs have the right damage main stat. And that's all it takes. That's how different the map is. That's how overpowered the map is. And so once you start putting in the substat, 4-3-3-1-1 will win every single time. And if anyone asks why, that's because crit is expensive. If you watch this video, I literally just prove his TLDR wrong with the section of the 4-1 cost and the 3-3 cost. Him saying that 4-3-3-1-1 is so good and that a godly 4-4-1-1-1 build will never beat it is literally just wrong. I tried to make this video as simple as it is to understand for people without a mathematics background, but it's definitely kind of hard, especially when you're not familiar with the optimization problem. So sure, you made this video simple for, not math nerds, but yeah, it's just simply wrong. I'm not a math guy myself, but seriously, I genuinely do not understand how almost everything in this video is wrong. The worst part is how he can say it with such conviction, okay? Like, I really try to be respectful when watching and critiquing, but as I watched more and wrote more, it just pissed me off more.
I was gonna make, my simple video once I reach level 60, just talking about the comparison of 44111 versus 43311 and versus an attack 4 cost. But now at this current point, I've written 2600 words for I don't know how long of a video. If you do watch this video, I'm gonna be honest, it'd be pretty cool if you at least unlist the video or write outdated or even don't watch on the title. That'd be pretty cool. Or hell, even if you'd like, make a new video. But misinformation, it just ain't cool. And the fact that your title is avoid this misinformation in all caps right now actually makes me want to super slide, okay? I hope you learned something from this, maybe, or at least change your perception perhaps. My 44111 video will hopefully come out soon enough. Thank you again for watching, and again, I really apologize if I sounded so pissed. I just don't think it's cool when I think there's just, misinformation spread around, like even with myself, right? I'll do my best to stop it or at least correct it if I did make a mistake. I probably won't do more stuff like this again, as this was just such an egregious case in my eyes. Thank you for watching, and please don't spread hate or anything like that, right? Though I understand how this video can come off as hateful, I'm just more so shocked as I've never watched that video before today. And thank you again, and bye. Haha, sorry, one last thing. If you do want to see a 44111 video, there's a really nice one which I'll link in the description, or yeah, description by Magyi. I will be using this in my next video as a reference for maybe some things, but yeah, you should go check it out. It's pretty cool.